Welcome to the Powercat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Now let's go to the rolling Flint Hills, home of the Cats and Dogs studio. Here's your host, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome to another edition of the Powercat Podcast. Fitz and Gills and Zach, and of course the dogs on the Cats and Dogs studio cam, which seems to be lagging a little bit, but we're not. We're okay. The dogs will just look herky-jerky, which is kind of weird. We're sponsored by the Fridge Wholesale Liquor. I appreciate you showing up for another dive into the questions from Wabash Station. That's what we do on this sucker. And when you're in town, you are required by the laws of the podcast to visit Fridge Wholesale Liquor. Even if you're not interested in any kind of party things, including your booze or your beer, you don't need cups. Just go in and say hi and tell them thank you for sponsoring the Powercat Podcast. And they've done it for many years. They're swell. We are on a time crunch today. We all have other commitments coming up quickly. And my wife is calling me right when I start this podcast. I don't know. It's going to be that kind of show. Let's get going with your questions from Wabash Station. Zach Carlson, take it away.
From O2 Cat, what does K-State need to accomplish to get special teams use status back? It seems like improvement across special team spectrum is the answer, but what single aspect is of most concern?
Just the return game for me. I mean, I thought punting and kicking weren't bad last year. They were passable, but the return game just wasn't very effective. Now, let's be honest here. Kickoff returns have been really watered down by the rules, and it's hard to get a good one. But punt returns are still tangible. I just didn't think they had very good blocking schemes last year. They didn't give the return people many opportunities, or maybe the returners themselves weren't good enough. I think they have a lot more options at those positions for this year. And I'll be honest, with the new coach, I'm very optimistic. If the NCAA passes the rule that would allow more coaches, which I think is coming, he will go on the full-time coach status. And I think that too would be good for K-State football.
I think the only answer to this question is returning, like you mentioned, but you look back to the kicking game. Chris Tennant, Ty Zentner, kind of the yips from Tennant a couple of years ago. I don't think anybody was saying, man, special teams U is down because we can't kick the football. I don't think that's ever been a part of special teams U, so to speak. I think it's all about the touchdowns. It's all about the returns. It's all about kickoffs, mostly. I think that's the biggest issue from last year. Punt return was fine. They didn't get one. They didn't get a touchdown last year on, any return, but, punts, half of punting is you're going to take a fair catch and you're just trying to make sure you don't muff the football. So once you can get that kickoff game, the kick return game going again, I think that's when special teams U is back and running.
I agree. I know
Thank you.
Talked about this on the last show. Just do the simple things, right? Don't fumble the ball and get the extra yard where you can, break a tackle here. Those little things can really add up in special teams.
I agree. And, I did a daily delivery a while back on the new kickoff rules for the NFL. I'd like to see college do it. They've been experimented in the XFL, and they adopted it. It's a total radical change in how kickoffs are done, but it brings the return game back into the sport while amping up the safety of the players, because they don't sprint downfield. They're just 10 yards away. The kicker's still in the same spot, but the other 10 guys are way up ahead, and it really changes how things happen on a kicking game. I'll be fascinated to watch at the NFL level, and I think if it works, it'll be in college in 25.
Is it a penalty if you don't kick it far enough?
Yeah, there's like a landing zone where you have to park the ball.
So you can't be a bad kicker.
No, you got to have someone that can't kick it too far or too short. It's very interesting. And it also takes away the surprise of an onside kick, because you literally have to, it's kind of like a 2-point conversion. You declare you're going for 2, like the NFL now, where you have to relocate the ball. In college, you can do a 2-point conversion out of your kicking formation, but you have to say, we're going to have an onside kick, and they go back to the other way. It's interesting how it's going to be done. I think it's pretty cool, though. I'm so in favor of getting the kicking game, the return game, back into football. And I understand player safety with those high-speed collisions, and this solves both of them. It's just aesthetically very strange to see players lined up that way on a kickoff.
Next question is from Wildcat Pilot 88. At what point in the season would you anticipate an or may appear on the depth chart for running back? So DJ Giddens or Dylan Edwards.
I actually don't foresee that. I think it will be one of those situations where Giddens is clearly the guy on the depth chart, but the way they're used, I think Edwards will be on the field quite a bit because of his flexibility. I just don't see them doing that to DJ unless it becomes very obvious. Unless Dylan Edwards carries the ball and looks like Deuce Vaughn and it becomes really obvious. If there's any kind of equality between the two, the tie goes to DJ, and I think that's the way the depth chart will stay.
Yeah, I think that if an or appears, I think it probably comes before the first game. I think that it would be a whole season type of thing going in. If you know that Dylan Edwards is going to be on the field a lot, and hey, maybe we want to start the game in this formation, and it just so happens that the personnel we have for this play includes Dylan and not DJ.
Right.
Maybe Chris Kleiman wants to be honest on the depth chart and say, yes, that could be either. But, I don't think it's going to be a Bill Snyder thing where you have an or there, but it truly is the second guy on the list. Right. That you're just trying to, protect DJ's ego. I don't think that DJ Giddens cares.
Big ego.
I don't think he cares, if he plays the first play of the game, the third play of the game, the 10th play of the game. I don't think it matters to DJ Giddens what he is. And I think that, I think Dylan Edwards is also going to accept whatever role he's given as well. I don't think that there's going to be any drama, any animosity when it comes to who gets the ball when it comes to those running backs.
I would agree.
Will Howard wasn't the happiest camper last year at times with Avery Johnson, right? And you never heard a peep out of DJ Giddens with Trayshawn Ward getting more carries in a certain game. So, no, I don't see this being much of an issue at all. And it's just sort of a thing that's going to be put on a depth chart if it's even there, right?
Right. I agree. Yeah. I think sometimes this is a weird thing to say. Maybe it's just from my years of training by Bill Snyder. I think sometimes the staff is too honest with its depth chart and, puts an or where it's not really necessary. But I think DJ is the guy. He's earned that.
Next question is from Powercat Ryan. Who will take more snaps in 2024, a Lockett or a Roberson?
Oh, is a punt return considered a snap?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yes, I would include a kickoff and a punt as a special teams snap. So I will go with Lockett.
Now let's point this out. Chris Kleiman has finally said finally that Sterling Lockett is beginning to show progress and beginning to pick up on the speed of the game. That's why he was the punt returner in the bowl game. But I think he's showing that he can be on the field for passes. I'm going to answer Lockett, but if the worst happens and Avery does go down at some point, it might be Roberson.
The wide receiver room is crowded, so I'm not sure how many snaps. I mean, that snap number for Lockett is going to be capped, right, to some extent. Whereas, God forbid something happened to Avery Johnson, Roberson could be on the field for over half the year, if not way more than that, right? So logically, I think I would go with Roberson here, guys.
Yep. And by the way, I'd like to apologize to our viewers. The studio cam's picking up my very white legs.
I hope it's your legs.
Gross. Yeah. The studio cam, and I'm bouncing my legs, but the studio cam's all herky jerky. It's just I don't know what's going on.
It's kind of purple tinted there. They're not that wide, are they?
Yeah, no. But
is there a rating on that? Is this like PG-13? This podcast? You need to change that.
No, it could be R because
legs.
No, it's either 18 and up or
Yeah.
Basically for kids.
Yeah.
Those are your options on YouTube.
We're not for kids. It says it right there on YouTube. We're not for kids.
We want to monetize our channel.
Yes, exactly.
Next question. Last question of the first half. We have first.
Holy cow.
Quick first half.
Let's make a long answer.
Okay. We got the opportunity here from Kat and Kahlo. If Will Howard starts all year for Ohio State and wins any level of Big Ten conference honors, and Avery Johnson does the same in the Big 12, what will that say about K-State and Chris Kleiman? Will K-State be an up-and-coming quarterback U?
That is a great question.
You can talk a lot about it.
I know.
Eat up this time.
I don't think it's any secret. You look at the NFL right now. Chris Kleiman's already got NFL players, right?
Yeah.
How many quarterbacks? Yeah. Well, there's in the last 2 years, there's technically 4 if you want to count Trey Lance.
Yeah.
I don't know how many you're counting, Gills. Easton Stick, Trey Lance from North Dakota State.
Skylar Thompson started a playoff game
Thompson
due to injury. Still happened.
There's 4 players, quarterbacks in the NFL that Chris Kleiman coached and or recruited.
Right. That's incredible. They
may not all be starters right now. They are on the rosters as backups, especially Carson Wentz at the moment. But find me another head coach that isn't named Nick Saban, and maybe even Nick Saban doesn't count. I don't know, that doesn't have or that has 4 or more quarterbacks on active NFL rosters. I don't know if you can.
I know. Amazing. Amazing. And I do think there's validity to this, that he seems to know what it is. And I've talked about this on the Big 12 Insiders. It's hard to identify when a quarterback has it, that factor that people want to follow them into battle, so to speak. People truly believe and are motivated by him, and he goes out and earns it on the field. Will Howard had that it 2 seasons ago, maybe less or so last season, but still was a really effective quarterback. And I think the reality of the situation is we need to appreciate that when he had more reliable weapons, and I just mean Deuce Vaughn was, not that DJ Giddens isn't reliable, but Deuce Vaughn was a home run hitter. And, he probably was more comfortable with receivers 2 years ago. I think once he gets into that Ohio State system, which he is, he's going to benefit from those assets being around him. I think he's poised to have a great year because he's a very good quarterback. And I think Avery Johnson is also poised to have a tremendous year. And I think it's going to pay off tremendously for both programs. But what would it, let's go take it a step further. What would it say if not even they're both invited to the Heisman ceremony, but they're both within the top 6 of the Heisman votes? It's going to be hard for Avery coming out of the Big 12 as a sophomore, but that will really send out a notice that, hey, there's something special going on with quarterbacks at K-State, and it's a system in which you can learn how to be a quarterback that can go to the next level.
Well, that could be. Go ahead,
Gills.
No, you're good.
I'll go. If you're K-State, you would absolutely love Avery to make the Heisman ceremony, but also having Will Howard there, because I don't think anybody's going to talk about Ohio State and Will Howard if Avery Johnson's there. They're going to talk about, wow, we got 2 Chris Kleiman guys, 2 K-State guys. This is such a wild thing to talk about. I mean, if you look at the betting odds right now, it's not completely impossible or improbable right now, but I think that if that happened, K-State's absolutely a quarterback U. You're going to be able to go through the whole tape with Chris Kleiman and how well, he's been able to develop quarterbacks and get them to the NFL. It'd be huge accolades for K-State if that happened. Now, I don't know what the odds are to parlay those 2 into making the New York City Heisman ceremony, the final broadcast there. Probably astronomical odds, but it'd be really cool if it happened.
I would like to see those odds. I know Vegas could figure it out based on they've already posted.
Probably math it.
Gills?
We'll be in Vegas. We can make a bet on it, Fitz.
Yes. Let's rub that into everyone.
Fund the trip.
Anyway, what were you saying, Gills?
I don't know. I mean, I don't have much of a point to add here. It's just that the consistency maybe hasn't been there at the next level for Chris Kleiman's quarterbacks. And I know Wentz had a real solid run for a while, but Thompson hasn't necessarily done a whole lot. Trey Lance has kind of fizzled out. And you can go back to that at the college level too. Like Skylar Thompson is a top 5 quarterback all time, top 10 all time, at least at Kansas State, right? You can make those arguments, but they weren't anything special. And maybe that's, I don't know if you want to get a little critical, that if these guys are going to the NFL, and I know they're not Tom Brady or Mahomes or anything like that, but if they're going to the NFL, well, then is there a problem there that those teams weren't better than they actually were, right? Now, what's the issue there? Is that the wide receivers or lack thereof that, these players didn't have, or the schematics? What was it? One thing's true is that Kleiman can get guys to the next level. That's a hell of a recruiting pitch that he has, but the on-field success as a collective, as a team, if they're going to the NFL, maybe that should have been a little bit better.
Okay. As a Heisman voter, humble brag, I find this angle very interesting, and it would be something I would notice if it wasn't Kansas State. If, let's say, Oklahoma State had a young quarterback that took over the job from a veteran quarterback who transferred to a major college and then had more success as a quarterback in the same system in the following year than his predecessor, would that change your measurement of how you would vote for those two, because he outplayed him in the same system? And I don't think anyone can argue based on the offensive line alone that he's inheriting more talent, more weapons, more ability to operate. But if Avery takes K-State to the Big 12 title game, if K-State gets the victory in the Big 12 title game, something Will wasn't able to do last season, he certainly did it the year before as a part-time starter, as the relief pitcher, would that kind of put into context how much Will Howard accelerated his performance with added weapons and actually make Avery look even better? That's kind of a complex thought, but I would notice it as a voter. Hey, he's performing better in the same system that guy was in last year. Did that guy get that much better by going to the bigger school, having the more talent around him, or did he just benefit from that? It's something I would note as a voter. That hurt my brain. That was a lot of
point.
thinking.
That was a lot. Can I get like a TLDR on that? Too long, didn't read. You know what that is, Fit?
Yes, that's it. And, if we break this out into a quick hit, good luck, folks. That's it for the first half of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. It was very, very short. I don't know why. We
had some brief questions.
We can really explore the space in the next half. We can really enjoy the whole area. Like we can have more. What is it? More. Never mind. I just totally screwed that up. More cowbell. That's what I wanted.
Oh, that's what you're going at.
Man, we'll be back. Jeez.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Please visit The Fridge Wholesale Liquor, located at the corner of Claflin and Westport Road in Manhattan, Kansas.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to the Cats and Dogs studio.
Back to the Powercat Podcast. Fitz and Zach and Gills and the Herky Jerky Dog Camera in the Cats and Dogs studio. I don't know why it's doing it. Look, I'll wave over here. I don't know why it's doing that. It's running off my computer like the camera that I'm using.
Your frame rate's off, I guess, maybe.
Oh, that might be it. I don't know.
Security cam. I mean, that's basically what it is.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess I have to restart.
Well, he has security at his house with his dogs.
Just got to make sure there's no ghosts.
Camera, guards.
In the room.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone tries to break in this house, they will think there's 2 Rottweilers waiting on the other side. Not one incredibly shy poodle that'll run away as soon as they come in, and another one that will run up to you to get attention. Dude would make friends with the guy breaking into the house. Maybe the guy wouldn't steal anything. He goes, "Oh, I made a friend. I'm going to go home."
You've seen the video of that dog, right? That some dude broke into a house and he was being nice to the dog, and the dog was just
okay,
just
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Friend.
Yeah. I've seen that on TikTok.
Yeah.
Yep. We're sponsored by the Fridge Wholesale Liquor. Make sure you check them out. There's so many guys named Mike there. It gets confusing. Say hi, Mike, when you walk in, and 3 people will say hi. But they have everything you need for your tailgate. So when the football season arrives, you better go to the fridge before your tailgate and get stocked up. Don't bring that booze from out of town. Buy your booze at the fridge. Zach Carlson with more of your questions from Wabash Station.
First question is from Came to Elevate. Is the current basketball roster of 11 players better than the 11-player team with no Tomlin and no Glover that took the court last year? Why or why not?
Gills?
So, current roster of 11 players better than last year. Okay.
Basically January of last year.
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, we obviously haven't seen anything from this group yet, so this is all premature, but I think there was a lot more safety last year. I don't know if that's not the right word, but like Tyler Perry, a 4-year player who came up, I know he's got a lot of experience, right? I think I had a better sense of what to expect last season. Obviously, K-State reloaded last offseason in the portal, but you just kind of felt like you knew part of what the identity was going to be. Next year coming up, man, you've got David Gasson coming back. You've got Michaela Bridge coming back. And then Taj Manning is also back, but he didn't really play much. But other than that, guys, that's it, right? Mm-hmm. 3 players are returning from last year's squad, right? So when Marquise Noel and Ish Masood were the only 2 players to stay, when Jerome Tang first took over, we all thought that was just nothing was normal about that. That was just because he took over a new roster and had to field a new group of guys. Well, that might be the norm now moving forward. I know guys are going to leave and graduate, right? That's part of it, but I guess now players leaving and transferring is also going to be part of it. But to answer the question, man, I don't know. I mean, that's tough. Like, we will see if Brandon Housen is more than just a sharpshooter, if he can do some more things for this offense, like Jerome Tang has talked about. Now on his tape, there's not a whole lot else than him shooting 3-pointers, right? You look at Max Jones from Cal State Fullerton, he's playing now at a much higher level. Same thing goes for, I guess Sanford's played some big time games, but Chor moving to the Big 12. How is this going to translate for him? So there's just maybe more question marks in my mind at this point in time. But man, I'm trying to think back to this team last year, I guess, without Tomlin and Glover. I don't know. It's tough. It really is tough. And like Cam Carter, coming into the year, we thought Cam Carter was going to be an all Big 12 type player. Throughout the non-conference, that stood to be true. And then he hit a wall, and there were maybe some distractions there for Cam Carter. And so I don't know what time frame, going into the season, going into last season, or are we just looking at what K-State had all together last year? So there's a lot of moving parts to this question. I like it. It got my brain thinking. I kind of feel like Fitz now with my ramblings.
Well, but you actually can get your brain thinking?
I can.
That's good.
And I don't have short-term memory loss, unlike you.
I do. Oh, yeah, I do.
What do you have?
White legs. Is that what we're talking about? Hey, let's be honest here. They don't have a true post. Great. Gasson played that 2 years ago, and he could play it again, and he's apparently healthy to play it again. But without, that rim defender, I'm not sure they are better right now without that back end of the defense. Which means I think by adding a true post, this team will easily be better, because even if you think it's close now, they have room to add 2 more pieces. Maybe Kaluma comes back. Maybe they go find another guy, and they certainly want to find a true post or someone that can become a true post and roll with that. So there's plenty of opportunity for this to get better. But as of right now, I think they're pretty comparable. I think you're trading turnovers for maybe a dip in defense. And I don't know which one Jerome Tang would prefer. The turnovers were troublesome, but they played pretty good defense and stayed in games. If they cut down the turnovers and don't play as good a defense, I think your result might be the same. But the good news is there's more to go.
Do you think that if the lack of defense meant that they could push a little harder, do you think they'd turn it over as much as the last year's team with their turnover problems, or would they be able to push and, overcome maybe some defensive struggles with just sheer offense?
It's a great point. As the dogs get restless, I'm guessing Becky's home as the dogs look at the door. I don't know, man. I'm not sure what Coach Tang would want. He loves that defense, and most coaches do, because I truly believe if you're not good on defense, you're not going to win any titles. You got to have that layer. As dude now moves from camera to camera. This is very entertaining for those watching. I think he'd prefer the defense, but I think he wants it all. He wants to be able to get out and run with success, not turn the ball over, play pretty good defense. And that's what he had in his first season. They could answer you on offense. They could stop you on defense. And boy, were they fun in the open court. If he returns to that, that was a really fun brand of basketball. And I don't think it was a kind of a alignment of forces that worked in their favor. I think that's exactly what he's trying to build. And their losses on the recruiting trail last year really undercut that plan. And this year they're having more success with that.
Yeah. I just think that, with what happened last season, it was such a throwaway season in the end that you could give me 11 guys and they could be wholly worse than what the team was last year. I'd still be at least a little bit excited because we don't know how good or bad they are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fresh slate. We're going to get this every year, good or bad, unfortunately. If you have a good season, enjoy it while it's going on. But if you have a bad season, well, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have a clean slate. And at the very least, you can look forward to the next season and hope that you have some gems hidden within your team that you got in the transfer portal.
I agree. That's
I'm not sure what K-State's record would have been last year if Rich, Ames, and Jones had all played more. It could have been worse, right? But it could have been better. But we'll never know the answer to that. And so I think like the raw talent, like that freshman class from last season was really, really good in that aspect. All three of those guys were 4-star recruits. And so, I mean, to answer that question, I mean, the overall record was what it was, but there was a lot of young talent that maybe, I don't know, Day Ames is going to Virginia and RJ's at TCU. Those are some two respectable programs. I know we've kind of bashed Virginia a little bit and how the grass wasn't necessarily greener for him, but Virginia is still respectable, right? So Who knows if those guys would have played more, if Ames would have been given the keys earlier on than he got them. Maybe this season's a little different, and maybe we're not having this conversation about those 11 guys last year. But Fitz, one more thing I'll add. You mentioned the post players, right? And how David Gasson maybe isn't the true post that you want. Well, defensively, that's where you might run into some issues, right? I know I've talked about this a ton, where you go up against Oscar Tshiebwe in Kentucky and you can still beat them. So I think you can work around those defensive issues that might present themselves. But offensively, I think the 5-out offense, David Gasson was a key part in that just becoming a thing, right? And so Gasson, Achor, all these bigger guys that K-State's got. I know Buddy Rich will probably play more of the 4, but they're versatile. They can do a lot of things. And so offensively, I don't think K-State's going to have really many issues without having a guy like Will McNair or Jarrell Colbert. Defensively, though, you can run into some issues. Jerome Tang has proved in the past, though, that he can work around those issues, right? Those guys still get their own, right? Oscar Tshiebwe went nuts against K-State. The stat sheet, I don't have it pulled up, but it get like 20 rebounds or something. It was nuts. And so K-State's still able to win those games, right? Defensively, that's where the question marks come up. But on the offensive side, guys like Naquan Tomlin and Gasson, those bigger guys, they can find ways to loop around a bigger guy who's not as quick and agile. And so we'll see what happens with next year's squad with the 11 guys. I know they'll probably get, knock on wood, you're hoping that they get 13 scholarship guys and they can get 13 scholarship guys that can play. K-State, Jerome Tang was simply dealt a bad hand with Quez Glover and Naquan Tomlin with everything that happened off the court. And so if they can get 13 guys coming in next year, just by simple math, right? That's better than 11. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I want to point this out. I think the coaching staff learned from that recruiting class that you can have a smaller point guard, but if you're got 2 small guards on the floor, let alone 3, you're at a huge disadvantage. And if you look at what they're doing now, Doug McDaniel's a point, so he's 5'11", and the off guards are bringing in are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". I think he knows he needed more size and length on the court, and he's addressed that. And I think that'll be a very good thing.
Next question is from El Camino Cat. How close do you think the K-State men's basketball program is to being one of the 10 best in the country?
It's going to take some work. Now, within a given season, we've seen they can be there. And
by the end of the season, they can be there, I think.
To start a season,
that's
where so many people are doing preseason polls now based on the coach and 1 or 2 players, because there's so much turmoil on every roster. It's hard to say, hey, they're loaded, because are you ever really loaded anymore as a major program, or are players just transferring in and out constantly? I mean, let's be honest with Kansas. They have Bill Self and Hunter Dickinson's coming back. That looks really good, even though Kansas is rebuilding so many other parts of that. And so I guess what I'm saying is you've got to go out and earn a lot of respect over a number of seasons if you want to be regarded as a top 10 program. Don't just do it. Prove it over and over again that you're worthy of being considered that high up. And then let's say Doug McDaniel has a huge year next year. I don't know that he will, but let's go with that. And he's coming back in 2025-6. Well, I think if K-State's had a big season, Doug McDaniel had a big season, you're going to see K-State very high in those rankings, because that's basically what you got to base that on now, is what few pieces they have coming back, how good are they, and how good's the coach.
So the question's from El Camino Cat, and I assume he's referencing Kellis Robinette had an article, and Jerome Tang told him that I'd have to get the exact quote pulled up, but he believes that K-State can be a top 10 team next year, right? I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but so that's probably where this got brought up. But my answer is you got there in year 1 with Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson. So it's possible to get there. Very possible. He's shown that he can do that. That's the Elite 8 is top 8 in the nation, right? So can you get that consistently? Can you hit on the portal every year? That's where this will be answered. Can you get those guys to come in year after year? Because the old way of doing things with, getting freshman classes that are stacked and having them stay for years doesn't seem like that's going to be the way college basketball is headed.
Agree.
The way I look at this question is, are you one of the 10 programs that ESPN and everybody else loves talking about preseason year after year? Doesn't matter if you're good or you're bad last season. Basically, are you playing in the Champions Classic? If you're playing in the Champions Classic, which every year it's the same, however many teams, you got Duke, Michigan State, KU, Kentucky. I mean, it's blue bloods. When was the last time Michigan State was actually good enough to be in the top 10 conversation?
Good point.
Michigan State is a perennial top 10 team because of brand name. They are the Nebraska of college basketball to an extent. I'm not saying that they have fallen off that badly, but that's once Tom Izzo leaves, that's probably what Michigan State basketball becomes. They probably don't get it right with whoever they hire next. They probably fall off a little bit. But right now, they're just, grouped in. Success by association, essentially, is how they are getting to participate in these Champions Classics or whatever. And plus, their preseason, everybody's 0-0 or 1-0 or 2-0. If they lose one, well, you played against a really good team. Yep. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy almost of being in this top 10. So if you want to make the club of top 10 teams, I think you need to be playing at Duke or at North Carolina or at Kentucky or at Michigan State. Every year you should be playing an away game at one of those places. And that same year, you should have one of those teams playing at home. I mean, you have to be able to convince some home and homes here, get into that level of conversation when you're scheduling November non-conference games against teams that are blue bloods, going to be 1 or 2 or 3 seeds in the NCAA tournament. And if you're winning those games, that's when you start becoming in and entering that top 10 conversation. Right now, K-State has one Elite Eight in the last 2 seasons, basically. I'm not going to consider any of the Big 12 championships because on a grand national stage, conference championships largely do not matter.
Especially if
conference tournament games do not matter. Yeah. There's one goal that matters, and that's probably making the Final Four. You don't necessarily need to make the national championship, but if you can make multiple Final Fours over a certain, 10, 15-year period, you're going to be one of those top 10 teams, whether you're a top 10 team or not, considered, national landscape, rankings, preseason hype. If you're doing that, if you're recruiting at a high level, you need to recruit well out of high school. You can't just get one guy as good as David Castillo is. They need 2 or 3 of those types of players every year, and convincing them to either stay, and if they're going to leave, hope they go to the NBA and get drafted in the first round. That's probably the next step, is just leveling up high school recruiting and getting some of those one and done type players. You get a Michael Beasley or a Bill Walker,
yeah,
you're back in that conversation again.
Okay, so I believe this 3rd season of Jerome Tang will do one of 2 things. It'll prove that K-State's a very good program, or it'll prove that one of his first 2 seasons was an aberration. So in all likelihood, K-State's going to be improved, but not as good as season 1. So I think the first of those choices be proven that Kansas State's a top 25 worthy team, but not, an Elite 8 type of team on a year in, year out basis. Or they have another elite season and prove that it was the 2nd season that was the outlier, or they struggle again this year and prove that the 1st season was an outlier. We're going to find out a lot about this program this season.
You mentioned being all top 10 program stuff. You said, Zach, I agree with all that, but K-State certainly isn't there right now. When you look at the recruiting trail, okay, Clifford's going to come to Kansas State. He's not going to go to Bama. Battle, he's not going to go to Gonzaga. He's going to go to K-State, right? If K-State was to be like K-State lost out on Patrick Gongba to Duke, because Duke is certainly a top 10 program, right? So losing out on a guy that goes to Duke, like at the end of the day, guys, can we be that frustrated about it? No, it's Duke. We all understand that. We get that. But if a guy's going to Gonzaga or Bama, why can't K-State be on that type of level? Go back to last offseason, A-Smith going to Texas, right? K-State, those are the types of recruiting battles that you have to win. And if you can start winning those consistently, then those other schools are going to look at you like, dang, K-State just took another one of our guys, right? How do you get to that level? That's the question.
Thanks for mentioning Alabama, because I think that is the perfect comp for what K-State should try to become. You're a little bit of comparison to being a football school, making waves in basketball, but they've come onto the scene. They've been good year after year. They make the Final Four. They're a good program, and they aren't considered probably in the top 10 best programs right now. And maybe they are, but they're not quite that blue blood level of preseason respect. So I think that's probably the path K-State should be searching for. Next question is from KSU Trumpet. How huge is it to have K-State's...
Sorry.
Didn't sound like a trumpet. How huge is it to have K-State's name still attached to huge viral sports moments like the Pop-Tarts Bowl and the funny story that Josh Pate shared this week? Does it help with national exposure, or are we just overblowing it?
No, I think it is cool.
It's great.
K-State was blessed to end up in the Pop-Tart Bowl. Just absolutely blessed, because the marketing stuck to them. They did such a good job marketing their sponsor, or their sponsor did such a good marketing job, that it sticks to K-State. Not well enough, apparently, to bring Strawberry back to life. But it's so funny. No, he can't come to your first game. You ate him.
If you are new to this and did not hear the story, basically K-State wanted Strawberry to come back. I don't know if this is for a basketball game or preseason football game. I don't know when this was going to be for, but they wanted to bring the mascot back. And Pop-Tarts Bowl said, no, he's dead.
You ate him.
You ate him.
That's literally their response.
That was their response. And then they're like, but wait a minute, there's 2 in a pack. Like, you made the thing for last year. Like, he's coming back for next year. Yeah, he's next year's Pop-Tart. He had nothing to do with you guys.
He'll be I'm sure they have something going to bring the second Strawberry out of the pack for their game next year. Incredible.
It's gonna be stale. I mean, when I eat only one Pop-Tart, I get a little Ziploc bag and I put the second one in it and save it for later. You don't.
Now that strawberry comes to life, wouldn't he suffocate?
There's issues with this theory.
The podcast. These
Pop-Tarts
that brings up.
Yeah, I'm really not going to support this mascot until it's blueberry.
Wildberry. I'm glad K-State at least put Wildberry Pop-Tarts into their trophy.
True.
Those are great.
I want to point out that they also mentioned that probably in the third season of the bowl, strawberry will be no more. It might be blueberry. It might be grape. They're going to have a different Pop-Tart. Folks, this is the most brilliant bowl tie-in of all time. People want to compare it to Duke's Mayo. No, just because you pour mayo on a coach doesn't make it overall. This was brilliant from the start of the game to the end of the game. When he went down in the toaster and then got spit out, I'm telling you, whoever thought of that is a sick you-know-what. That is so hysterical. It was so well done. But yes, it does stick to you. Like Pop-Tarts, it will actually attach to you, become part of you. And that's what happened with that marketing.
You want to hear my hot take on Pop-Tarts Bowl?
Okay.
I think that it's a 2-year deal. They had it planned for 2 years, and this is going to be it. Once Strawberry's done, he's done, and then it'll rebrand, because it rebranded like 2 years ago to Cheez-It, and every 2 years they get a new sponsor. And I think the fine people at Kellogg's will come up with a new concept for the game.
The question becomes this: did they see an improvement in sales? I mean, that's at the end of the day what marketing is about. Yeah. And if they did see a bump, they might have gone in it with planning for 2 years, but it's been so effective. I don't know how it doesn't impact sales in a positive way. I mean, I bought some for the first time since I was a kid, and I was a kid in the Old West. So, I mean, that Pop-Tarts came in a wooden box back then.
It's pretty impressive.
It's very true.
Zach, do you still have a Pop-Tart on your shoe?
I actually, this week, I finally put them into like a little like plastic container and just soaked the bottoms in, and I finally scrubbed off the Pop-Tart. There's a little bit on the
late May. You're just now getting around to this.
Well, these shoes that I wore to the game, that was like my first or second time wearing those shoes, and like they're kind of some cool kicks. Like they're nice. Like they aren't where when we go to Bramlage, we kind of hike through the snow a little bit if there's snow or mud. So I usually try wearing some beater shoes to basketball games. I'm not trying to wear nice shoes through mud and snow when it's wintertime. So I just didn't ever get them out because I didn't want to ruin them. But then when we go to Kansas City for the Big 12 tournament, I'm like, hey, we're going to be on regular streets. It's warm out. I can wear these. And then we're in the hotel and I put them on and I'm sticking to the carpet and the Hilton President. I'm like, why? I look at the bottom and it's just strawberry all over, just caked on.
The viewers are getting an added bonus. They're finding out that dude's kind of a freak and he likes his buns to be slapped. He cut that for me. So now he's just wandering around looking for love. Next question.
Last question of the podcast from 3G Wildcat. Assuming there won't be any more realignment until the ACC collapses, how long do you think we have until that happens?
That's a big question. I just talked about this on today's, or I guess it'd be Wednesday's Big 12 Insiders, that I'm kind of really split about this because, I mean, the folks at Sikkim 365 saw their growth during the initial round of realignment. John Kurtz, our friend John Kurtz, benefited tremendously on his channel from last year's realignment. The Big 12 Insiders would benefit incredibly from another round of it this summer. But also, I don't want the ACC to go through this. I don't think you did. I don't want them to have this kind of turmoil, even if it benefits the Big 12. So part of me is like, no, let's keep it at the 4 conferences. I think that's important. But then the business person in me is like, yeah, bring them apart. Let's add some more to the Big 12. And, let's expand the footprint. Let's have a whole summer worth of shows talking about realignment, because that's what happened. It turned into an extended thing into the year. It was a mess. But so I think if it's going to happen, it's going to happen soon. I do. I don't think this can drag on.
I think that whatever Florida State's doing in the courts, I think that needs to probably get settled first. Yep. And that'll probably be, it could be years until that's settled. So at least for the time being, I think everything's fine. I do think that, all the AC schools that are not named Florida State or Clemson, I think they're willing to wait out and see what happens. I don't think anybody's going to make the first move. I don't think a North Carolina or a Virginia is going to announce that they're going to the Big Ten before this gets, brought up or, everything gets settled. I think that everybody's going to kind of wait and see on Florida State until, unless the SEC or the Big Ten, they pony up a whole bunch of money to any of these schools to get them in. And if they're doing that at that point, I don't know what that means for the rest of college sports, but I don't think that that's a realistic possibility for ESPN or Fox to be paying ACC schools to move, kind of like what they did with OU and Texas, moving them to the SEC. I do not think that that is a viable option right now with the ACC. So I think until Florida State is granted release from these rights, this grant of rights with the ACC, I think that everything's going to kind of stay stuck, and it could be 5-6 years.
Okay, there's another layer to it. Again, every time we do a video on House versus NCAA, it doesn't perform well, and I know why. I mean, it's a lawsuit, and it's kind of hard to understand and tangled mess. But how does it impact this? Will these schools see themselves needing to get out of that contract into a more advantageous one and try to get to the SEC and Big Ten as urgently as possible, because they're going to need that money to survive the settlement? Or will the settlement from getting out of the ACC be so substantial they won't want to take that on top of whatever this legal settlement is? It's a really interesting balance of what they'll do. And to be honest, if you're an ACC program at that point and you've lost some of your biggest brands, ESPN is going to come back and say, we're not paying the same amount for this. Other schools will have to come to the Big 12 at that point. They've convinced themselves they're better than the Big 12 when the numbers don't indicate that. But when the numbers do indicate that, it'll be very obvious to those mid-level ACC programs like North Carolina State and Virginia Tech and maybe Louisville that they got to move. They got to get out and they got to get to the Big 12, because it's not a whole lot better, but it is better. And if you get enough emphasis, momentum behind it, maybe the conference as a whole kind of collapses and they get out of their grant of rights. We'll see.
One thing I'm curious about, and I just thought of this while you were talking 30 seconds ago, how are these conference charters worded? Like, if Kansas State is a member of the Big 12 and all of their fellow members are members of the Big 12, but they play in the NCAA and they agree to abide by NCAA rules, we are NCAA members on top of the Big 12. What happens if the NCAA collapses and is eliminated?
I don't know.
Are schools going to be tied to their conference if the NCAA collapses? Because the whole premise of being in a conference is because you get to play in the NCAA tournament for basketball. You compete for national championships that are ran by the NCAA. If there is no governing body that exists, how can you have a grant of rights if there's no rights?
Interesting. It's a great point
to have. Right. What happens to college sports if the NCAA just says, you know what, we're declaring bankruptcy. We are, we're done as an organization. Obviously, a new organization will come up, but I don't know how you can possibly grant rights to a conference under certain stipulations, such as being NCAA members, and survive that.
This brings to mind just two interesting points here. One, if the Big Ten and SEC make an effort to break loose and do their own thing, again, you have to make sure they understand, okay, you don't have access to the tournament. You don't have access to the baseball tournament. You don't have access to any of our championships. You're leaving the organization. See you later. Have fun. And they might do that. Then we say, fine. The SEC baseballs was really counts. But that'll be just the SEC championship, because the Big Ten isn't a player in baseball on a consistent basis. It's too far north. And also, I keep coming back to Chip Kelly's idea of just removing college football from conferences. and make it its own thing and make that, that super league for football only while the NCAA maintains the other sports. So many things going on with this.
I feel like that's the next logical step, is separating the football and just making that what it is, and then figuring out what to do with the rest of the sports. It might be a function
of the settlement. If you've got to pay X amount of dollars in settlement, which will be, $20 million roughly, and you're also required for some kind of revenue sharing that will be around the $20 million a year, maybe that element of it will say, okay, we're not participating. Schools can say, we can't do the $20 million a year, so we're going to go back to whatever level, and those that can do the $20 million a year of revenue sharing, that will be what makes them the third subdivision of Division I, the Super League, because they can afford that on an annual basis. It's a mess. If you're not following the case, you need to read up. There's some great recaps online that you can go catch up on this case, because it's going to change everything about college sports, and the Big 12's already approved that settlement. They were the first to do so. So it's moving. They want to get it done by July 1, because that's kind of the new fiscal year for all these conferences and schools. That's it. That's all. We've done our thing.
I agree.
Thank you. We made this much longer by talking quite a bit in the second half. Hope you enjoyed the Powercat podcast. Lots of cool stuff up on the site today. Hopefully, if everything went right, and we pulled it off, it'll link and cure interview up. If it's not, we'll have it soon. And that'll be with Ryan Wallace. We'll see you real soon. And make sure you go check out the Big 12 Insiders if you're not. And please consider subscribing to that YouTube channel. We need to get that to 1,000 so it could become its own entity in reality. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.
This has been a GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.